This video is all about using the spelling of the word to give you the answer. For example, capacity. When I look at that word and I break it down, Cocaine Anonymous, Pennsylvania air conditioning. Okay, we got to know 5 key points. This isn't about being creative. It is about using the spelling of the word to do the creativity for me. You see that line right there? Someone did a line of cocaine and they're grabbing an air conditioning consistently at that angle, consistent choices. There's an appreciation that other finger doesn't touch this finger. See, an appreciation of the consequence. That's a con, incidentally, somebody in jail. So you don't get electrocuted. These fingers won't touch. The human body is a conductor. A lot of people that try and steal electrical wires, sometimes they get electrocuted. Why is this middle finger going down here? Why is this ring finger going down here? Why is this pinky coming down here? All right, the appreciation of the consequences, the rationale behind the decision. What is the rationale behind using the strongest finger of the hand in this little groove? So the air conditioner doesn't fall out of your hand. What is the clear communication of choice with the ring finger? I'm letting someone know that I'm married. It is a clear communication of choice. What is the rationale of railing the vent, sometimes called louver vents? Railing the vent, relevant. Okay, enough about that. Watch your ears. Okay, on to this is very recently. We just took this quiz today. What does euthanasia mean? It means European Union, Texas high school, and a woman named Anne with no knee. I'm not going to explain how that I locked that in to give me the answer. What is related to capacity related to euthanasia? What do you think of when you see VOL, Lady Vols, and Pat Summitt? Any woman that is a head basketball coach of a university is competent, okay? Whether it's Pat Summitt or Tara Vanderveer from Stafford. You can't get more competent than that. Now, here's an example of the human body, okay? And this is going to sound a little out there, so I'm not even going to bother explaining it. This human body got minimized into this circle. Why? Because we're dealing with competency, and that circle tells me the brain. What does non-voluntary mean? This might not make sense to you if you're not taking this class, but just play along. You see those N's? I have the alphabet laid on the human body. The N's are where the knee would be. The O is where the belly button would be. That means this patient has no competency. Their brain is gone. This I just used somebody getting smashed in the face with a lead pipe, which often happens in prison. Again, their face is turned in. I'm not going to go explaining the answer, but okay, we're going to fire this video up. Okay, this video that I'm going to show you is actually being played at 150% speed. Before I start, this video is talking about one purpose. That is, when you're studying, all you need is the word itself to get the answer. I meant to say the letters of the word. Let's say the individual letters. In other words, the answer is locked in with the question because the professor has to give you the specific word. The specific spelling of the word. Say, for example, you were taking a test. It doesn't matter if you're studying to be a pipe welder or a welding inspector, or an optometrist, or an endodontist, or an airplane pilot. And let's just say Quaker Oats, meant what it means. It's let's just say a breakfast cereal. Okay, I would look at that word, or any word that begins with a Q. It can only be Qatar, where the World Cup was just played, or it could only be Quinones. So I would say Qatar's, United Airlines, Kentucky Emergency Room. And because when you're flying a plane in the wintertime and you look out the window, you see what? You see snowflakes. That would give you the answer of what's in there. Okay, I'm going to start this video. I'm going to start that video in a second. I'm actually overlaying my voice over another video that I did. You can see the title of this video. It's called Word Mapping, and I used to use this a lot for spelling, and accidentally discovered it works great for just memorizing vocabulary words. When I break down, or I would say memorizing anything, down a word, any word, I have a system where the first letter I only use a person or a place. The second letter I might use an action verb, and the third letter I might use an animal or a car. So that's why I don't get confused. For example, that let's just look at the word word. It can only be Willow or West Virginia. Let's look at the word mapping. It can only be Mary, or let's say Marysville, Ohio. Or you could use Michigan. You get to decide. For spelling, it can only be Sue or Switzerland. For the word Anne, it can only be a woman named Anne or Athens, Ohio. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start this. See, you get to pick your own system. You know, and eventually when you get good, you start mapping two words, like South Pacific, like I meant to say two letters. Marysville Alliance of Poles, like Mary's Electron Microscope, like I would just say Athens, Notre Dame there. Okay, you get the idea. But when you can start doubling up and tripling up and moving from 2 words to 3 words, you'll really fly, and you don't even have to study. Most of the research says the human species has to review something 7 times to get it right. I can do it in less than 3. There is the title of this video. You might have to turn the volume down a little bit. It's important to know when you're word mapping that you're not guessing. For example, let's just use what's right in front of me. It's not like I walk up to any word and say, oh, today I'm going to use wagon. Today I'm going to use willow. Today I'm going to use West Virginia. Today I'm going to use a word hog. You've got to have a pre-plan. And the pre-plan that I use is the same pre-plan that all memory experts use. PAO, person, action, object. All right, so you've got to have a list of people before you even start this. It's just a simple alphabet list, right? Ann, Beth, Chris, Diane Sawyer, Eleanor Roosevelt, boom, 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 Odessa, Patricia, Rita. Willow lives in West Virginia. Vicky lives in Virginia. Tina lives in Texas. Sue lives in Switzerland. Okay, and then you got to have a alphabet list of action verbs. Absorbing, bouncing, cupping, dancing, eating, hopping. You get the idea. Rotting, overeating, nodding and narrating, mopping and moaning, kicking. And then you got to pick a strong noun. You don't have to have anything. You get to decide. You don't necessarily have to use action verbs if you don't want to. But you got to use something and stick with it. Or at least stick with it a significant amount of time that you never get confused. And what they recommend is using animals. And the reason they recommend using animals is because why? Because you do not have to anthropomorphize animals because they're already living creatures. I'm just going to pause that a second. Or you could use cars, but you've got to have that information before you attempt to go learning. For example, Acura, Buick Boxer, Camaro, Datsun, electric vehicle, Ford F-150, Chio, Honda, aardvark with an ant on its nose, bear. Usually I use cow, dog, eel. You get the idea. Florida gator, horse. And incidentally, I place those on the human body, too, so I can double lock them in. For example,
Patricia's puppy. Linda's lion. And incidentally, what kind of car would Linda drive? A Lincoln. What color would Linda's car be? It would be lemon. What color would Nancy's Nissan be? I'm just going to pause that for a second. What religion would Linda be? She'd be Lutheran. What would her favorite drink be? You got to have an alphabet list of drinks if you want to go that far. Maybe you don't. You could say Labatt Lager. You could make it non-alcoholic if you don't like alcohol. And incidentally, when I said, like, we'll just use this character. So where would Linda live? Linda would live in the leg. Let's use a male character. Where would Frank live? In the F of the foot. Let's use another male character. Where would Jay live? In the jackal of the foot. It's shaped like a J. Nancy lives in the knee. I talked a second ago about Patricia. And obviously I use the back of the leg because it's shaped like a P. For Tina, I would just use, arms stretched out, let's say in a T shape. For Eleanor Roosevelt, I would use the I, along the eyebrow because it's shaped like an E. For Beth, I would use along the nasal lacrimal duct and the cheekbone. The same thing with Diane Sawyer on the other side. Let me interject something there about Eleanor Roosevelt's eye. Let's just say this is the eye, right? Along the upper eyebrow, down along the eye bag to totally make a E. Where does she live? Estero, Florida, or Ethiopia. What does she drive? An electric vehicle. All right, I'm going to kick this back up. But see, it's good to have 2 or 3 things. This way, when you look at a word, like, for example, the people I'm making this video for, we're going to be tested on what is autonomy. And see, I'll go off board if I can find 2 letters that'll let's say, rank higher than single letters. I would just use Ashland University. And again, I have a character in Ashland University, and I believe autonomy is in line with your belief system. So the person I know that lives in Ashland University, his belief system along his nasal lacrimal duct and cheekbone, and I believe it's, let's just say moral philosophy and living with life's in line with your life something. And I use his leg. See, when I do that, I'm using somebody in Ashland University for the word autonomy.
Whose name is what? Andrew Unitas.
Because it begins with AU. And when I say his belief system, I go right down the nasal lacrimal duct on the cheekbone. In this case, it would be the cheekbone of Beth. If it was the other side, it would be the cheekbone of Diane Sawyer. So that...
How does Andrew Unitas show autonomy? Well, he goes and visits Beth and visits Mary and visits Linda.
Literally is in his body. So his belief system is, let's say he believes in Beth. And then, I'll go ahead and start this back up. You see what I'm saying? When you get good, you can double lock it in. And let's say you had to go deeper for a class. Then you could forget all about that guy from Ashland University and go into Beth and whatever, let's say whatever you're being asked by the class, you just go deeper because you have another human body to work with.
Not necessarily forget about Andrew Unitas, but you're at a new station, you're at a new location, so you can kind of work from that point if you needed to. See, when Andrew Unitas goes to Bree, Ohio to talk to Beth, okay, he's going to get a magical symbol from her, or let's say a metaphorical tattoo, or let's say a metaphorical implant in the body along the nasal lacrimal duct and the cheekbones to give him the significant power of the B.
And then when you get asked in class, what is autonomy? You could say it's based on the person's beliefs. And then I use the midsection here for the letter M. And then I use, his left leg gets kicked out. So it's with I believe it's life plan or something.
That letter M really gets kicked up from, let's just say above the knee all the way up to the rib bones, because they call that, the core of the body, or let's say the midsection. If you don't have a good midsection, what should you do? Go to Marysville, Ohio, and find one.
Remember him walking with a kicked out, let's say, left foot, hence the word life.
I was referring to exercise there, by the way. You know, to develop core strength in the midsection.
Right. Because it's shaped like an L. I believe it's belief systems and morals. But getting back to what we have to know, when I look at capacity, right away, Cocaine Anonymous, Pennsylvania air conditioning. And when the teacher asked me in class, what is capacity? I just, sometimes I'll X that out, but I'll say it. I'll say it like a guy doing a line of Coke on a Pennsylvania air conditioner. And it's, who's in charge of the air conditioner? The surgeon is. It's situational because the professor said it is. Just like an air conditioning is situational. Whereas, but it's situational because the air conditioner in the hospital doesn't need to be on in the summertime.
Obviously, I meant to say the wintertime.
The reason the surgeon gets to pick the Pennsylvania air conditioning is because he's the top dog. The cleaning person isn't going to decide how warm or cold we're going to set the air conditioning in the, let's say, the ICU. And actually a lot of, let's say, doctors' assistants complain that the doctor sets the air conditioning too low because he's got, 3 or 4 gowns on and some of the, other people don't, let's say. Competency, I use Columbus Original Manufacturer. And the teacher would say, what's the first thing we want to think of there? Well, let's just say, original manufacturer, a lot of people, they have aftermarket parts. So we need to put a judge or let's say a court system in charge of them to make sure they're not fudging the system. Meaning that aftermarket parts sometimes are made very poorly. In fact, Scotty Kilmer recommends that people don't buy extra market part or aftermarket parts. It's a fine line. You can save a lot of money, but some of that metal is not heat treated. And I've heard stories of guys buying ball joints that were aftermarket parts that popped out on them in less than, let's say, a shorter amount of time that you would expect. It's global, okay? So they could say that company is global, and then we look for guardianship. We need to put guardianship over this company because they're so bad. I'm just going to kick this thing just so it doesn't. That's exactly what I didn't want to happen. I'm just going to set this over here for just a second. Okay,
The next one coming up is surrogate. Now, normally I do not jump off board and forgo my letter lock-in unless the lock-in is so good that I know I will not forget it. This is a perfect example. Sarah rowing the gate. Okay? And the same thing with the case study with Catherine. I use cats turned in, meaning the woman's suicidal, meaning she's planning on turning in her chips.
I thought it closed me out, but I didn't. The same thing. See, if I can find surrogate, right away I know it's Switzerland University, let's say rodeo. That's how I would map that out. But sometimes I get luck. Or I would map that out Switzerland underwater read. You heard of a QR code? That's kind of like a make-believe underwater QR code. But let's just stay with what I said in the original video. Let's say Switzerland University rodeo. And the word is so strong to a memory, I can just say Sarah rowing the gate. Now, one of the questions on our test is going to be, what does it mean to be a surrogate? Well, if somebody's rowing a gate, especially like myself, who's a welder, we can break that gate apart and make it into a goalpost. And let's say basically you're being something for a patient, and you're being a voice for the patient. Why? Because Sarah is rowing the gate. A lot of times I'll use underwater, and that let me know that the patient doesn't have a voice because they're underwater. And that's exactly what they're looking for on the test. Being a voice for a patient in line with their goals and values and maybe beliefs.
Now, an average person is going to be thinking to themselves, this is confusing as all get out. My response is this. No, it is not confusing. The teacher has to put that on the test, okay? She has to. It's like having a cheat sheet in front of you. Here's the kicker. You've got to develop an alphabet system that you memorize before class, that you know automatically that's Sue or Switzerland. Automatically that's Chris or Columbus, Ohio. Automatically that's Patricia or Pennsylvania. Not confusing at all. Not even remotely. How could it possibly be confusing? You have the spelling right in front of your darn face.
Lines with their I believe it's goals and beliefs. And I'm not going to talk about how I welded that into a letter B. Or actually, I will, because I know Greek shorthand. That's how I do it. But we're not going to get into that right now. Veracity, okay? How do I know that's honesty? Because the people in West Virginia that work at an emergency room are more honest than, let's say, inner city folks. Typically, people say people from the country are more honest. What's wrong with inner city folks? Excuse me? Nothing wrong with living in the inner city. I have a lot of money to travel because I live in the inner city. I don't know who this guy thinks he is. I'm going to start it back up. Therapeutic privilege. I would just use Texas high school emergency room. And word to the wise, I do not use Texas high school, and I don't really feel like explaining that to you. But the point is, I'm going to use Texas high school emergency room to give me the answer. And the big thing is, it's let's say a physician's right to not tell the patient information because they will believe it will harm them. Well, I got that locked that in with that high school and that emergency room. Because maybe it's not good to have high school students right next to emergency room, particularly the type of emergency room that is, which I don't want to get into. Okay, on to justice.
Let me clean this up. This is a little sloppy, and I wish I had the equipment to erase stuff. You see how, any first word is obviously Jacksonville, or Janet for the female, or Jay for the male. All right, so Jacksonville, the United States of America. Here's my, let's say, semi-attempt of drawing a map of the United States. In, let's say, the imaginary country of Jacksonville, okay? And when I'm drawing, I'm moving to the right. And you'll pick that up. But I just want to explain, basically I'm starting in Michigan because it's a morally right. I'm moving right. And I'm stopping down in by Bike Week, Daytona Beach, to pick up some, let's say, steroids or EPO. And I'm going to bring it back to Bree, Ohio, to help the Cleveland Browns, share their benefits and burdens. You'll understand what that means. It's a little sloppy here, so forgive the next minute, folks.
Right away, even years before this class, let's just say a year or however long you've been doing this, I know that first letter can only be Jacksonville, or let's say Janet, or let's say J, University. But let's just say Jacksonville University, okay? And I actually used Jacksonville, United States. When I was making that video, my mind was jumping ahead. And now look how good this is. I look at that, and that's going to be on the test. It can't be any other way. Jacksonville, United States. Notice how I started in Michigan, okay? And the definition is what? It is a morally right principle that has to do with the distribution. I'm in Florida, in Daytona Beach, the distribution of the benefits and burdens. I stop in Bree, Ohio, right? I'm cycling around the whole United States. Why? Or I'm cycling around. Sometimes Jacksonville, I'll write those words together as if they're one word.
Here's the thing, okay? When you're taking a test, you're going to see Jacksonville, United States, and it's going to come back to you that you drew a map of the United States. There's no confusion. There's no creativity here, folks. The word is doing the creativity for you. So get that whole thought out of your mind that this is too hard for you. You have the word in front of you. It is the ultimate cheat sheet.
Jacksonville, United States. You could even use an art picture and make it imaginary. Okay? I'm distributing stuff from Daytona Beach. Why am I stopping in Bree, Ohio? The benefits and burdens. And if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, there's a whole lot of benefits and burdens. Some people would say mostly burdens. They haven't done too well in the past. Oh, actually, that's not true. That's not true. But their overall record over the past 25 years is nothing to write home about. Okay, and incidentally, for number 19, I use Bernie Kosar a lot, and tube related to the major system. I'm going to start this back up. I know if I'm starting, I'm drawing the United States and Jackson University, and I'm starting in Michigan. Why? Because it has a morally right pattern that has to do with something, the burdens and beliefs. I believe it's the distribution. Well, I stopped in Daytona Beach for Bike Week to help distribute it, let's say. See, the morally right, it's morally right that I go right, because in our country, we write from, let's say, left to right. Notice I'm going right down to the Daytona Beach. Their innings, I would use Franklin, let's just say Franklin, Ohio, Allen Iverson's rodeo. Now, part of that definition is sufficient health care to last the patient throughout an average lifespan. Now, Allen Iverson has an average wingspan, and he's in the NBA, but his quickness makes up for his, let's say, average wingspan. Okay.
I changed that word rodeo to Allen Iverson's RV because RVs have a high depreciation rate. You know, in other words, they're only good when they're new. So that tells me that, we favor younger patients. You could say the same thing with athletes. You don't see a whole lot of professional athletes over 40, do you?
We'll kick this back up, and we'll let this play. Let's just say Nightingale. Well, I actually, to be honest with you, I actually use the word, well, it's nothing inappropriate. Let me just say that. No, it's not inappropriate at all. It's the name of a paint. It's called Navajo White. And I do have an alphabet list of paints. And one of them is called Home Depot, and one of them called Glidden, and one of them is called Pratt and Lambert. Let me go ahead and play this. What color would Sue's Subaru be? It would be silver. What color would Tina's Model T be? It would be turquoise. Okay, you get the idea. I used for back to that letter N. I just used the color Navajo. That's all. All right. Now, if you want to get a little more fancier, you can have an alphabet list of colors. I talked about that. And incidentally, what type of cigarettes would Sue smoke? She would smoke sweet corn. No, she would smoke Salem. Sorry, I'm going to start this back up. And you'd have to, if you want to have an alphabet list of let's say, drinking fluids, you can do that too. Well, I have a machinist background with my colors. This is just an example of colors. Nothing big here, gang. You don't need to do all this, but it's good to have 2 or 3, let's say, alphabet lists, or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10. Apricot aluminum, blue brass, cayenne copper, dark Daffy Delrin. Emerald there for E. Ford F-150 for flax. Ford F-150 flax. Pink for Patricia. Lemon for Linda. Let's say Navajo. Let's say mauve for Mary. Rita would be red. Mauve for Mary. Key lime for Kay. And I really like that name Kay because you can't forget it. That was taught to me by Jerry Lucas. And the same thing with the male name Jay. We'll use a male character. What would I use? Jay. J-A-Y. For some of you men that are into cars or women that are into cars, there you go. Acura. Beth drives a Buick. Chris drives a Camaro. Diane Sawyer drives a Datsun. Not a Datsun P210, but a Datsun D210 in Dayton, Ohio. What color is it? Dark Daffy Delrin. If you got an alphabet list of holidays, Christmas, Boxing Day for Beth. Diane Sawyer would celebrate Dingus Day. Eleanor Roosevelt would celebrate Easter. All right, you get the idea. Nancy would celebrate New Year's. Heather would celebrate, Dale drives a Geo. Heather drives a Honda. Ida drives a Isuzu. What would Heather drink? Heineken. What would Ida drink? IPA or non-alcoholic IPA. Jay drives a Jaguar. Belinda drives a Lincoln. And if you don't know how to spell, what would Lincoln drink? Labatt's. For Lincoln, just remember it ends in Lincoln Navigator. Sorry about all the voiceover, folks. I don't have the equipment to cross stuff out. I'm going to start this back up. Just to speed this up, I'm not going to talk too much about this, but all right, we have an alphabet list of this. Gail plays a gong. Heather plays a hammered dulcimer. Ida plays zillion pipes. You get the idea. Mary plays the mandolin. Okay, the old mandolin suits the mood that I'm in. Let's hear it again. It's a long night's ride. Incidentally,
See, the reason this isn't as hard once you get started, when I use Linda, I always use long, whether it's long Linda and for a long boat, a long Lincoln Navigator. I'm trying to think of the music that Linda likes. I think it's Linda Ronstadt, but it would be a tall or a long version of Linda Ronstadt. All right, I'm gonna start this up.
Who plays the strings or the spoons? Where does Sue live on West 19th? What does Sue drive? A Subaru. Why does Sue live on West 19th? Because S is the 19th letter of the alphabet. Willow lives on West 23rd. Why? Exactly. What's Sue's favorite color? Silver. What's Willow's favorite color? White.
It's so important that you know the alphabet switcheroo. In other words, let's just use Willow. Willow lives on West 23rd, right? This way, if you're using a memory palace in a car and you're up to the 23rd station, you can automatically kick in Willow there. Or, some other things, let's say a wagon. You can kick in a wagon. You can kick in Winston cigarettes. Your favorite movie that begins with the letter W. However many alphabet lists you want to create.
What's Vicky's favorite color? Violet. What's Yanni's favorite color? Youngstown yellow.
What does Vicky smoke? Virginia Slims. Why? So she stays slim. What does Vicky drive? A Volvo.
Start this back up. Yanni lives in Youngstown. Zambo lives in where? Zanesville, Ohio. And incidentally, a lot of times I'll lock, Yanni in with Mark Price, which was a pretty decent, I almost called him a power forward. That's funny. A point guard. Yeah, because he was number 25. I'm going to start this up again. The Zambo Drive, a Zephyr. Okay, and see, it's highly personalized. I am the only male in the world that is under 50 that would put Arlo Guthrie for A. Okay? I'm the only man in the world that would have Bob Seger not once, but twice with the Seger system down here. Okay? So
the Seger system got the X, and I am going with the Steve Miller Band. That's a little bit of an old chart. I just didn't want to double them up. It's too confusing.
In a sense, you are a snowflake. Nancy listens to Neil Diamond. I just paused that. Incidentally, I changed that to Madonna. And I changed Kid Rock to Kenny Rogers. And I started back up. Linda listens to Linda Ronstadt. Kay listens to K Rock. Jay listens to the Jackson 5. All right. Now, how is this related to our class? Well, we'll take the obvious. This is a case study, right? Directly from our class, right? Mrs. White. I'm just going to pause this. I was very careful not to have any, let's say, information related to our school. I just want to make that point. And I cut everything out. So, anyway, I'm going to start it back up. And I would just use World Health Igloo there. I used to use Island, but I changed that to Igloo because it's more of a, it's just a...
I'm going to speed this up, folks. World Health Igloo. In the case study, Mrs. White could only eat ice cream. You see the simple association there. Ice cream, Igloo. She had 3 scoops of ice cream because she went to, get treatment 3 times a week. It took her 4 hours to eat the ice cream because the facility was 4 hours away. There was a kid found by her knee when she was found, hence the name kidney disease. Okay.
Picture, a circus. How could you do any better than that?
Let me interject there. You might say this is really confusing. My response is no, it isn't. This does not belong at the beginning of the word. For me, it belongs either at the end of a syllable or an end of a word. The beginning of the syllable is a person or place. That's why I don't get confused. Now, if you're watching this and you say, this guy, I don't have time for all this stuff, fine.
Just use a first and last name. Just use an alphabet list of movies. Anne's Avatar. Diane's Donnie Brasco. Chris is at the circus. Diane Sawyer's in the dugout. Eleanor Roosevelt is really into electron clouds. Frank is at the fountain studying, let's say, Ford. That's Henry Ford, by the way. Gail's at the graveyard. Heather is at the house. And you're not locked into anything. I have changed when I change like for F, I've changed that to Ferris wheel. But it's not like I need to say, oh, I gotta forget all about the fountain. No. I just say I'm in the Ferris wheel, right? And I'm looking down at the fountain. You know, and one will take precedence sometimes. Sometimes you can use both of them. In the Honda parking lot. Jay is at the jukebox, Kay is at the Klein, Linda's at the lifeboat, Mary's at the museum or the mall. The O, that's really... Incidentally, I changed Klein to kitchen because it's more powerful and it's picture forming, let's say. You know, this whole thing, anytime there's an O, it's either Odessa or Ohio State. And a lot of times you'll hear slang, you know, particularly on college campuses, like we're going to the O, or we're going to the yard, or we're going to the cage. So that's, you know, I used to use Oriole, let's say, or, you know, an animal there. Related to Ohio State. Patricia's at the park. Quinones is at Quicken Loans Arena. Sue is at the stadium. Tina is at the teepee. Ewer is at the university. Vicky's at the vase. Willow is at the wagon in the Walmart parking lot. There's a whole thing about that X. That guy was a great rollerblader. I really respect that guy's athleticism. So much so, I rollerbladed back from Cedar Point because I was so mad he was so much better than me. But anyway, Yanni's at the yacht, and then let's say Zambo's at the zoo. Okay, we'll start that back up. We'll get back to this class. But it's all pre-done. You know, before that, I know it's World Health.
I'm just bumping this up a little bit.
Up your grade from a C to a B, you know, if you show up at class every day. Got this aside, so who's that? Okay. There's another case study about this guy, Charlie. Now, I thought about using Charlie's Angels or Walking Charlie, which is a famous guy that walked up and down, I believe, the west coast of Florida. I see his plaque every time I'm cycling up the west coast of Florida. Why didn't I use that? Why? I'll tell you why. Because the stakes are too high, and I don't want to make a mistake. This isn't some game. Why didn't I use Charlie's Angels or Walking Charlie? How come? Because it's too risky. You want the professor's going to have to put on the test. What do you remember about the case study for Charlie? And I just look at it and I say church, assault rifle, London, Internet Explorer. Now, how would that help me? That's the $1 million question. Because anybody that would go to a church with an assault rifle is going to have some, let's say, emotional setbacks. Now, this guy has schizophrenia, right? Now, statistically, people with that disease are no more dangerous than anybody else. But as far as we're concerned, to get it right on the test, you know, that's how I remember that, church assault rifle. The guy has an assault rifle in his church. Something's not quite right with his brain. Let me interject this. Let's say, for example, all right, you're taking, let's say 3 or 4 classes, or 5 or 6 or 7, if you're like my sister, that can handle that kind of load. Let's just hypothetically say you were taking a final. And let's just hypothetically say the professor said, referring to the case study of Charlie, please give me 3 key points. And you have no idea. But you look down at your paper and you say, well, church assault rifle. And let's say it's a multiple choice question. There'd be enough in there for you to say, oh, that's right. Oh, that's right. Particularly if you do it so much. It's not like I keep repeating it, but it bears repeating. Anytime there's a CH, I use church. Anytime there's an AR, I use anti-reflective or assault rifle. Anytime there's a L, it's either Linda or London. Internet Explorer. If that was IE, I would use Ellis Island. See how easy that is? Okay, and then I might use an assault rifle as a memory palace to help me, I believe that guy had a what? Particularly if you know Greg's shorthand alphabet. You could just do this. You could use this symbol for R, this symbol for L, big, this symbol for E. And what if you knew American Sign Language alphabet? Not the whole thing. You just say C, right? H, right? A, R, right there. What's he got? Schizophrenia? He's a little twisted, let's say, on a bad day. Wife and stuff like that, and a daughter. I'm not sure. I'm not looking at that, but I'm going to start this back up. And I just create a story around that, and it's going to come right back to me because it's right smack in front of my face. She can't ask me a question about Willow when she's asking me about Charlie. Excuse me for the pause. Here's one that we haven't touched on yet. And incidentally, I'm not making fun of people with emotional setbacks. My point is this. Lock it in so it's easy to get A's in school. That's my point. Yeah. And no, I didn't start reading it yet. I'm not that much of a nerd. But using my system, it can only be Dayton, Ohio or Diane Sawyer. I actually changed her name to Diane Droyer. We won't get into that. But the point I'm trying to make here is let's just say Dayton, Ohio X. Okay? Now, look at the nice combination. Right away, I know we're talking about a young kid. I think that's athletic. It's hard to see through this camera. Yeah. We're talking about a young kid because an older adult would not be using an axe. Typically, let's say. Although there are a lot of men who are over 75 that are just as strong as some men that are 25. But you get my point. Yeah, so right away, that tells me. Ain't no one over 75 going to be using an axe. Okay? Now, incidentally, this guy, that's a case study with, I don't like that blurry screen. I don't think I have a choice. If an axe has a wooden handle, okay, it can catch on fire. That's going to tell you that there was an explosion. Let me come back in 4 seconds. Run, Johnny, run, Johnny, run. I'll be right back. My other video, I'll make another video that touches on the major system. Now, that last guy, Dayton Axe, we'll just call him Dax, he was 25, right? 2 is N. You see that? I'll cover this in my next video. 2 is N. Okay? 5 is L. That makes up the word nail. If you have an axe, you're going to hit it with a nail. That tells you the guy's age was 25. How cool is that? Obviously, I'm just using associative thinking. Hammer, nail, And again, if you're sitting in class, and let's just hypothetically say you're socializing with your peer, and all of a sudden the class starts. And all of a sudden the teacher turns to you and says, can you tell me about Dax? And you just say, oh yeah, Dayton Axe. Wasn't he the guy that hit the nail? And you just so angelically say, wasn't he a 25-year-old patient where there was an explosion? Enough to get you out of the jam, folks. Simple that is. Let's go through some more class-related stuff. What did we talk about? What's 2 things you're 100% sure is going to be on the test? Non-maleficence? I think it's non-malevolence. Sorry, gang. When I made this video, I was tired. I'm going to start it back up. Basically, Mary's Athletic League. Basically, Mary is a Christian name. No harm, no evil. No evil. I didn't even look at that word anymore. That was it. Now, I did cross out the non part because Mary is such a strong name. A lot of Bruce Springsteen songs, they'll say Mary, and it's, supposedly that's, you can't get more innocent than a name like Mary. That was it. Okay, Mary's Athletic League. Right away it says, do no harm, do not inflict harm. What's another one of the words? Beneficent. Here I go a little off board because the word has Ben in it, which is a male name. I just use Ben Elvis, which is the first last name combination. And I don't think I talked about last names. I thought I had a list of last names out here. You do. Relax. Let me give one quick look. Haha, it's off to the side. There's an alphabet list of last names. See, and this is pre-planned. I'm just going to stop it there. I'm not saying you have to know all this stuff, guys, but you got to have, at the very least, a first and last name. Because, again, I'm going to repeat the 6,000 million 100 times. The professor or wherever at work, they have to give you the letter. They have no choice. And it's going to come right back to you because we only have 26 letters in our alphabet. You know, a lot of these are, you know, some of these I use Ford, Elvis, Evel Knievel I use for E. I'm sorry. I think anyway, Dick Goddard.
I meant to say K got changed to Knievel in you know, through the years for me. And then recently, actually very recently, I used to use I use Dick Goddard now for G. I think I used to use the Great, you know, like something the Great. I'm gonna start. I can't think of the name. Is it Alexander the Great? And I've changed that to old Dick Goddard. I don't even know if he's still alive, but he was very famous weatherman in Northeast Ohio. People used to. Anyway, let me just start this up.
You might know Dick Goddard from the weather forecaster. It's not like I'm using it the night before. You know, if I need to lose a last name, it's right there. Anderson, Bellcook, and we're talking about what? Ben Elvis. Sure enough. I mean, you know, let's say Elvis Sin. A lot of times I put son on it because, you know, Johnson. You see what I was saying before? I used to use Henry the Great or whoever the Great. You know, I changed that to Dick Goddard.
Sorry about all the repeats, folks.
Like some of those sheets are a little bit old. And I was too nervous when I was making the video to pull all that stuff by, you know, it was just too much. So I didn't want to let my mind think too much. I'm going to start it back.
I see. I can't remember what I said from one video to the next. That's why you're going to get some overlap. Just, you know, take it in stride if you can.
Got to plan that. And beneficence means what? A moral obligation to do good, right? And the professor said what? She said it's more than that. It's putting people in a position to thrive and acting in their best interest. So I'm going to stop it. Incidentally, let's pretend this is Elvis, okay? When I said act in their, I have the alphabet laid out on the human body. There's A, B is along the nasolacrimal duct, C is along the pinner of the ear, D is along the cheekbone, E is along the eye, the high eyebrow, F is along the foot, as in football. We skip G, H, I have it along the sternum. J along the jackal. I'm going to skip K. L, I'll just use the leg. M, I'm going to skip N, I use Nancy along the knee. O, I use the belly button, sometimes the occipital lobe. P, I just use the back of, I used to know that. It's not the gastrocnemius. Is that the gluteus? I think that's the glutes. I hope I might be embarrassing myself, but let's just say it is for purposes of conversation. I'm going to start this back up. Well, so what I was saying with beneficence, right away when the teacher says, what is beneficence? And I think, well, you know, a doll of Elvis, I need to bring them up. I need to bring them up, let's say, by the midsection. It's a moral obligation to do good and put them in a position to thrive. So we're going to hold them right here, let's say by the P in the back of the, you know, that's shaped like a P. And then in the A, what did I say? I think it's act in the best interest of the patient. So I'll use that a lot. It's called haptic memory. Or you could say
See, the thing is, because Elvis is so iconically known for the hips, you know, that's why you could say put him in position to thrive, you know, so he can make his money not only by singing, but dancing, you know. And one more time, an average human brain is going to say what? This is confusing and too much work. And I'm going to fire back and say, no, it isn't, because when you're taking the test, you're going to have that word Ben Elvis right smack in front of you. So the story you created is going to come right back. It's the ultimate cheat sheet, and it's legal. And I had to review that one because I knew it was going to be on the test, and I really, you know, the story of Elvis is going to come back, and I don't want to, let's pretend this head is on the screen. You know, I really pulled that, you know, I'm acting because I'm grabbing where I have the A, you know, I'm acting in the best interest. And in my story, Elvis was a puppet, so I had to act in the best interest to get him on stage. Maybe he did some stuff that he shouldn't have been doing the night before. So we had to give him a little bit of, let's just say, spiritual energy, you know, to get him to get through the concert. You know, that one I will admit, that one I had to study. But guess what? I ain't looking at it right now. And guess what? When the midterm or the final comes, if this was a 300 level class where it was a comprehensive final. Old Inner City John wouldn't have to look at this. Old Inner City John wouldn't have to look at non-malevolence. Old Inner City John wouldn't have to look at condition of doubt, because he uses Bluetooth, and a Bluetooth, when it gets staticky, let's say, there's not enough information getting through. So old Inner City John gets an A on his test.
American Sign Language. See that book there? I don't want to lift this up. Okay? All right, so I do a lot with American Sign Language and with Gray Shorthand. So every human being is almost like a triple memory palace of their self, particularly if there's someone like me who knows an alphabetic list of the whole eye: anterior epithelium, Bowman's membrane, cornea, stroma, decimase, endothelium. For F, I would use the fovea centralis, macula retia. We'll just skip ahead to X, I would use the optic chiasm. I could do the same thing with the ear. I could do the same thing with the nasal and the nasal conches and the turbinates, to help warm up the air. I like to do that a lot because you can see that when you're taking a test. The same thing with the hand, and the rings on the hand. And let's say, I know the name of this white thing, which I'm not going to say because I don't want to sound dorky, but,
what I meant by that, folks, is let's say you're using somebody in class. You can see their head, you know what I mean? Like, you can see their hands, so there's not like, you know what I mean? That's why I focus so much on the head and the hands. Anyway, speaking of hands, what is this? There's my shorthand. What are the 5 moral principles in bioethics? Well, Arthur Fonzarelli tells us what? This is my, I don't want to say who that is, but, that's a trigger finger, right? Typically of a gun. So that's, cause no harm. Non what? Exactly. The middle finger I locked in with utility, and I scratched these people's names out. See? The ring finger, when you get married, although I'm sure somebody that went through a divorce would not agree with me, but there's benefits to being married. Tax benefits, beneficence. And incidentally, we talked about Fonzarelli, right? I think that's autonomy. Because you could say no one's more autonomous than a guy in a leather jacket, right? He's authentically himself. Take a wild guess what I use for the pinky finger. What would be the most logical thing I could use for the pinky finger? You guessed it. Pinky Tuscadero. And my sister's husband, we always have we just joke about that. Typically, females are more concerned with what than males? Is it justice? Not bad, folks. A lot of times I use the ring finger for that, and the middle finger, and there's a person I use. I meant to say the ring finger for marriage. This is actually, this index finger is related to a situation that happened in 2nd grade. Just for time, nothing bad, but I still use that person. At the time, she was probably 20 years older than me, but it's amazing. See, that it's the stuff gets indelibly etched on the human mind, the youth. And, you couldn't do any better than, Arthur Fonzarelli. For that, which I just don't want to say. I just don't want to do that. But you get my point. I've used that over and over and over and over again throughout school. And that's why I got a 98% on my anatomy and physiology final. And I might have got 100 because all the people that were like, the neurotic people that, have a nervous breakdown if they miss 3 questions, I could care less. I mean, I was happy with the 98%. But I heard the teacher say she might have entered one of them in wrong. Not trying to brag, but when I know what I'm supposed to study, folks, I am unstoppable.
Let's start this back up. She puts on that test, he or she. whatever professor you're talking about. When the professor puts that on the test, you're gonna see that word beneficent. So you're gonna think Ben Elvis, and right away you're gonna say, let's go to the character that's Ben Elvis. That's what you're gonna do. I'll start this back up.
Ooh, that was a little bit.
Let's say.
That was a little bit rough there.
I covered all locked in with Elvis, which I'm not going to get into. That's very easy.
That was made. I think I did that late at night. I probably wanted to get to bed. I probably shouldn't have said it with that type of veracity, let's say.
Particularly on a multiple choice. See right there with Jackson, you could use a Jackson 5. Give yourself a last name like that, and you become a good singer. Let's say.
I was referring to the 5 hands. A lot of times I'll use the Pentagon or Jackson 5 or Michael Jackson's glove for 5, and I have things for 4 and I have things for 3 and I, blah, 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 blah.
We are at 11 minutes. Okay? And I obviously I bought this book before class. I had no idea, the type of instructor. And I wanted to be a little ahead of the game because I was, this class is a little different, but I assumed we were going to have to write a few papers, which I'm so glad we don't, but believe me, it's hard enough with the way it's set up. But anyway, I'm ahead of the game. Right there. I can't go through these definitions. I can't see through the screen. But that word is Rhode Island, right? Self-evident. Meaning that Rhode Island in one word is self-evident. Close enough to the definition. Act-based theory, ACT, American College Test. Very similar to the definition. Applied directly to the individual's actions, just like you would get on an ACT test. Beneficial. I'm going to go back to this one, autonomy. I talked about that before at the beginning of the video. Ashland University. And the kid that I use there, he's a great guy. And believe me, he lives his life in accordance with his own morals, which I would put in the midsection, right? Where the N would be. And I believe it's, life plan. Life plan of his legs, let's say. There's a lot of, a lot of open space there. So he lives according to his life plan. And
I'm going to kick this up a little bit.
You can say similar values of Irish American, or you can use Italian American.
That was collegiality. I just use IA, Irish American, which tell me, similarly suited individuals, or you could say Italian Americans.
Contract. I would just use a con on a racetrack. And he's what? He's promising and pledging that if we let him out of jail, he won't run away. How about...
Sorry about that repeating, folks. That's because I'm overlaying 2 videos.
That word covenant, I actually use a church that I am not belong to. Okay, there's a lot of good people that go to that church.
There's an example of where I would forget my system and just go with the word covenant as a memory, as opposed to saying, using the spelling. I do realize that the words are blurry. That this camera can't focus because it's the third layover, and it doesn't know what to focus on.
Church, but I won't get into that. I'm going to start it back up. Facto. Right away. Franklin air conditioning. The air conditioning temperature, they tell you it's 72, but it's only 78. And I'll repeat this twice perfect.
Meaning, in reality, the temperature isn't what it says it is. And all I got to do is look at that and say Franklin's air conditioning. Let me go ahead and bump this up. You get the idea. I'm using the spelling, okay? And I'm creating my own system.
Who is a good person. And why wouldn't you want to have a good person on staff? Or let's...
Right? 8 is F. Mafia. See? 38. How good is that? Let's move on to Mary Wright. Or I'm sorry, Mrs.
I'm going to kick that back, actually. Just a little bit. I think we're good right there.
Say Rachel East.
And just in case this thing shuts off on me and I don't finish, I got enough here where I'm happy with it. But I do want to go through these case studies really quick. Marcia. Again, you could use Michigan or Marysville, Ohio. Mary's assault rifle, okay? And then Shoe House Association. That tells me right away it's a woman, because if you're like my sister, you have 3,000 million pairs of shoes, more so than a typical man, let's say.
Not that that's a bad thing. I'm just locking in with the word shoe house association, and that tells me that it's a female patient we're dealing with, and
If you have an assault rifle, where are you going to place it? Along the left armpit, or let's just say a woman's breast is where you would. That's woman had breast surgery. Let's move on to Mary's. And that guy was called. Her doctor was called Doc Martin, right?
The case study dealt with a woman who had breast surgery, and all I would have to do is see MAR, I should say, and know that case study was related to that type of surgery.
Again, shoe house, Doc Martin. If you put that in there, especially at a 300 level class, you know the age of the patient.
Doc Martin was her doctor. Again, associative thinking. Shoe houses, Doc Martin shoes. Doc Martin. You put that on the test, it gives you an extra little one or two things, and that's the difference between an A and a B, particularly in 300 level classes.
Which is 38, because I locked that in with Mafia. And we go to our secret chart here, which we're not going to talk about. Mafia starts with the letter M, and 8 is F, right? 8 is F. Mafia. See? 38. How good is that? Let's move on to Mary Wright.
You see, again, associative thinking. Mary's assault rifle. Typically, people in the Mafia have assault rifles. And then, with the major system, 38 equals Mafia, which tells you the patient's age.
I'm sorry, Mrs. White. We talked about that already. World Health. Igloo. I got it right this time. I always want to say Iguana. Mr. Redman. Let's just say, we use a male's name. Rich's erectile dysfunction. That guy had heart problems. That's an easy lock-in. Here, you could say Cocaine Anonymous, Texas High School, but sometimes the word is so good I just stick with it. Cats turned in. This woman was suicidal. She was turning in her chips. We talked about Charlie already.
Right? Catherine. A little tiny switcheroo. Catherine equals what? Cats turned in.
Talked about Dax already. Let's go to Elizabeth, right? Lizard in a bath. Lizard bath, right? That girl was flopping her arms. Let's go with MC Allen.
Incidentally, let's say I didn't go with the similar sounding situation there. I would go with I would use John Elway's leg. Elway's leg, number 7 of the Denver Broncos.
Or let's say Mrs. MC Allen. Why did she hurt her back? Because she only works with Allen wrenches. She didn't have the strength to move boxes.
Now, notice what I said about that. In my mind, because that word said motorcycle club Allen wrenches, that woman worked at a Harley-Davidson plant, and her job was only to take off, I don't know, let's say the crankcase of a motorcycle gearbox. So she didn't have the power in her, let's say, back muscles to move the heavy boxes when she moved. Folks, I am not looking at that case study. I have not looked at that case study for over 6 weeks. And I'm still able to give you the answers. Just because of the spelling of the word, I cannot stress that enough.
Back to Elizabeth, or a lizard in a bath. The lock in there, if you put a lizard in a bath, it's going to be moving its hands up and down. The case study dealt with a young child that had, let's say, issues where she moved her hands a little more than would be considered. I don't want to get into all that, but the point is, a lizard in a bath moving their hands is going to tell you, basically the answer.
I'm just going to go ahead and play this out. Oh, incidentally, this guy is probably the best memory teacher alive today. So if you want to get B's in college, listen to me. If you want to get straight A's in college, listen to this guy. This guy's really solid, man. This guy, I would support this guy 100%. And he's a good guy, and he's just a really class act. This guy, great books published. He's on YouTube, obviously, and I can't. Words cannot express how highly I think of this man.
I would join that guy's channel if I were you, and I would watch some of his videos.
And Barbara Oakley, for that matter. He comes from that ilk where he's just guy is just first class, man. Okay, I'm going to start this back up. I mean, as you can see, I got a lot to go, so you get the idea. I mean, you don't have to listen to it all. I might run out of, it might not upload all of this.
What I meant to say is you might want to take a break. There's plenty of good stuff left.
So, anyway, I'm going to start it back up. I don't think I'm going to read some of these just because of time, but I do want to go through, like, deontological. Where do I look at that? Dead end, on, a person named On, Texas octopus, and I would just use a log. And that's so good because, let's say you were cold in the wintertime and you were camping. You're not worried about the doggone consequences. You're just worried about what actions will make you, right actions to keep you alive in the wintertime. Dead end. I'm just going to say there's a character called On, Texas octopus, and I would just use a log there. There's enough of a story in there to give you that definition. Duty proper, Dayton University, coyote year. And dang, forgive me if I reverse some of these letters. I'm looking through this screen, and I'm not going to remake this video. For egalitarian, I would just use Estero Gale, or let's say Ethiopia Gale. You'd have to lock that in, but it's a very good, it's not pre-planned. That's knowledge that I have, same thing.
And incidentally, sometimes I'll go back to that word and I'll just use a memory palace that begins with the letter E, like the Big Egg that stayed open 24 hours back in my youth, and everybody would go there on Saturday night, and we thought we were the coolest people in the world because we were out at 3 a.m. And actually I did use the Big Egg memory. I just call it Egg V. Sometimes I'll switch.
I meant to say egg big, not egg V. Big as in boy.
Switch it around on purpose, and then I don't want to go in how I did that, but, so I got it double. I got the word and then I got the memory palace.
Either fuel injector, if I'm using a two-word combination. If I'm using a first and last name, it's Frank Isaac. Or let's say Franklin, let's say Igloo, even though I always want to say iguana. I used to use iguana, but I changed it to Igloo. But I can't get iguana.
See, you don't get mad at yourself. You just use an iguana sitting on an igloo, on an island. And that's all one symbol, by the way.
Iguana. A lot of times I'll just double it up, like iguana on top of an igloo. I'm going to start it back up. Those are pretty obvious. I thought there was a meta-ethics. Meta-ethics, what's the abbreviation for Maine? Okay, and Texas assistant. We'd have to anthropomorphize the state of Maine, or we could use Mary Elvis again, or Mary East, or Mary Elvis living in the state of Maine that wants to get the heck out of there and go to a warmer climate, which is meeting her friend or his friend, meeting her friend, Texas assistant. Okay, why is she doing that? What's her justification? It gives her meaning, and I forgot. I'll be honest with you. It gives her meaning, and I'm trying to get it to impress you. Grounding. I believe it's ground. Yeah, because the state of Texas is warmer. That's why, and that'll come right back to you on a test, just like it did for me right there.
Why would it come right back to you on a test? Because you're gonna have the spelling right in front of you. So any story you create, it's the cheat sheet of all cheat sheets, folks.
I'm gonna start it up. Or let's use a male name. Let's just say Marcus.
Keep in mind, folks, this is playing at 150 level speed. That's why I sound like I'm on Quaaludes.
Mark E.
I'm so disappointed that the print is blurry. I did not expect this, but there's enough. It's clear enough.
Why did he go down to the Texas assistant? Because he lived in Maine. Because it gave him justification and meaning and grounding. Because he was able to put his feet on the ground because the state of Maine was so frozen.
It's not about being creative, folks. You have the word in front of you. There is no creativity involved. The spelling of the word does the creativity for you.
Here's a good example of how I would just cut the block, as they say in the inner city. That's a slang word for not doing all your work.
Boy, aren't you just so tough with your little slang words.
I would just use pub, okay? And it means, I'm looking over this phone, so forgive me. Let's just say a willingness to state your evaluations publicly. Well, if you're in an Irish pub, you're going to be talking a lot, okay? Two-tier system. I would just use Texas Walker operation. And I'm just going to pause it there. See, when I look at Texas Walker operation, Okay, that's a strong male name. I actually use that karate guy. I can't think of his name.
His name is Chuck Norris.
I can't think of his name, but he's an independent guy, and he doesn't, a lot of, let's say, strong men that are karate men, they don't need health care because they're so healthy. So he wants to use a two-tier system where he only pays for what he needs. I'm going to fire it back up, give you some other things, but I'm scared I might say something that's a little.
Texas Walker Operation, Texas Walker Octopus, whatever I can do. It's Texas Walker. The rest will fill in the gaps.
You could use the name. I would just use Unitarian Church here. Name Val, or you could say Vicky's Atlet. I'm going to bump this up, gang. I'm going to bump this up. Let me see where I'm at. Your palace is when you're taking full classes, or let's say, God, even basically what I was saying. If you go to school full time, you've got to have ways to cheat. That's my only point there. I shouldn't say cheat. You got to have ways to be creative to give you that buffer, man. I've gone to school full time, and I played soccer while I was doing it for the college. So believe me, I know pain, man. A couple of times I fell asleep with my shin guards on my legs, and I had a quiz the next morning. You wake up at, let's say, 6 a.m. because you were so tired from the night before. And your half sleep cycle because you didn't really go to sleep because you barely set an alarm, and what a nightmare. Start this back up. 3 credit hours. See, a lot of memory expert places talk about use a car, which is a wonderful thing. I'm going to skip number 1. Okay, so we got the 2 headlights. This is just bonus footage. It's really, I probably shouldn't have put it in here, but I had to at least talk about location-based mnemonics really quickly. And I don't know why I skipped number 1. I just probably couldn't think. You know how a lot of the old Cadillacs and let's say Rivieras had a little thing on the front hood. That's what I used for 1. I used 2 for the headlights, 3 for the fan blades, 4 for 4 cylinders. But the thing is, you have to know the alphabet. You have to know that Beth is always at number 2. And if you know the major system, you know that Noah is always number 2. You have to know that Chris is 3. So you lock those in with the fan blades with the new information. You have to know that 4 is who? Diane Sawyer. You lock that in with the 4 cylinders. You have to know that 5 is who? Eleanor Roosevelt. 6 is Frank. Okay? And
see, with the 4 cylinders, it's belief. So do you believe that Diane Sawyer's 4-cylinder car is going to start? I certainly do. The woman's worth $8 million. Believe me, she's not driving an old car. Believe me, when that woman turns that key, her car will start. You have belief in that.
Here's that. When I locked in the, I think it was a code of ethics for nursing. And I am not looking at this, gang, and this wasn't even planned. But I believe it was dignity, values, beliefs. And values with the fan blades. Let's say the fan blade is kicked like this, and it makes a slight V as it curves in. Dignity, I just locked that in with I pretended that the headlights had a little knee.
See, there's a person involved, too. I can't stress how important that is. So I lock in the values with that person. Even if she doesn't value the same thing I value, I would make it something that she does value.
Button that helped kept them in place. And then for 4 cylinders that I believe it's going to start. And I think it was respect the patient's beliefs or something. I'm going to go ahead and bump this up because you get the point there. Still talking about that car. I like I used 2 spare tires for the number 8. I believe I'm talking about my own sign language for Heather, which I used 4 fingers together because I hope Heather's the 8th letter of the alphabet. I think so. I think Gail's the 7th.
And incidentally, I lock in Heather with 8 is enough. Now, that girl actually went to the same high school my mother did. She didn't go to my high school, but she was very popular, and she used to hang out with us at good old Taco Bell back in the day. I think she has 3 boys, but as far as I'm concerned, she had 8 children. And she drives a Honda. And she lives in Hudson, Ohio, even if the story isn't true.
Why is Gail 7? Because this is where Gail lives, right here. The sternum and the clavicle make a number 7. And incidentally, right, I get a little more, let's say, picayune with the skull because I can see the skull. Sometimes I'll use classmates, nobody sitting next to me, but let's say on the table across from me. I'm going to start this back up. The number 7. Let's just say I'm gonna switch to alphabet list. Now, Beth lives here because the cheekbone along the nasolacrimal duct. Diane Sawyer lives here, right? Because the cheekbone along the nasolacrimal duct. Nancy lives here. Or you can say a Nissan lives here. So you see how you can double those up real easy.
And a lot of times I will lock in, like Nancy, as being a great athlete who drives a Nissan. And if you maybe come up with a sport that begins with the letter N, or a amusement park ride that begins with the letter N, but I'll be very specific. Like that's Nancy's key feature. whereas Beth and Diane Sawyer's key feature is their cheekbones.
You see, back to that amusement park ride, NASCAR races, back to the cigarettes, Newport, back to the type of drink, New O'Reilly as opposed to Odessa, Old O'Reilly. What type of music would Nancy listen to? Well, you'd have to have an alphabet list of musicians, as in Neil Diamond. You see, so if you're at that station and you know exactly what number N is, which I believe it's the 14th letter of the alphabet, you already got all that. And then you got your new information. You can lock in with Nancy, Newport cigarettes, NASCAR driving, Neil Young. I'm trying to think of the religion for Nancy, and I'm not looking. It might be new aged. I don't use religion too much. I have an alphabet list of religion, but you know what I mean. You just, man, you can fly. Why won't you forget this? Because when the teacher, I know I'm gonna bore this down to the death. Why? You can't forget it. It's right in front of you. It's impossible to forget it. You created the story. The spelling of the word's going to bring it back for you.
What does Nancy smoke? She smokes Newports. What does Nancy drink? She drinks New O'Reilly. What does Odessa drink? She drinks Old O'Reilly. What does Patricia drink? Pabst Blue Ribbon.
When you have those 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 things that you can add to that location-based mnemonics, the weaving is so simple and it's fun. It becomes fun where you can go ahead and, let's say, read ahead, your assignments. And then when the professor asked you in class, you might change the words so he or she doesn't pick up on, just so, the professors want students to contribute a little bit,
Got a case study up with that dude named Charlie, right? See, I covered all this. You get the idea. I'm able to map anything on the human body. I got an alphabet list of 26 and I got a number. I'm not going to go through all of that, gang, but let's see here.
Meaning that I have an alphabet list and a number system on the human body.
I covered enough of that. Oh, let me see. Okay. Part 2 is coming next week. I swear to God, I would never do that. This is just taken. This is like bonus footage, okay, guys? This is just taken from the 100 most commonly.
I have a second video to this video that didn't get included in there. You'll see the second video. I haven't made it yet, but I just wanted to throw that in.
I have an index card of the title of that second video. Is the point being made there?
Here I'm just using spelling. You might, this is a long video, and that's okay. Basically, I'm just reiterating the same thing. I'm using the spelling, but you might get an idea or two. I wouldn't expect somebody to watch this through the first time.
Misspelled words. Lieutenant, right? I can only be 2 things for the first letter. It can only be Linda or London. Okay, Internet Explorer University. If that was switched around, I would say Ellis Island University. 10, I usually use Lionel Messi. You could use Ant. I never had a problem with that.
No, I don't. I use a specific somebody that I don't want to say. That was also number 10. But, sometimes I'm intentionally changing things to protect the innocent.
Last part. How about restaurant? You could say Rita's Extra Cents or Rachel's Extra Cents or Richfield, Ohio's Extra Cents. I never had a problem with that. The only hard part about restaurant for me was what? Texas Ashland University. And if you have a problem with the other part, you could say a red ant.
Not so much now, but when I was younger.
And I just make Ashland University global or franchise. Like it's such a special area that it can sell its uniqueness to areas of Texas. If that was a BAU, I would just use Berea Ashland University. If that was a CAU, I would just use Columbus Ashland University. If that was a DAU, I would just use Dayton Ashland University.
That's why you gotta have a little book there, right? keep track of your progress. And all of a sudden 2 months go by, and you review it twice a month, the stuff starts to stick in your mind. Maybe a little more if you want, particularly the stuff you work with more. But some of those alphabet lists, I don't look at that often. But when I first started, some of them, I looked at them a lot.
If that was a WAU, I would just use West Virginia or Willows Ashland University. Double them up on the location, double them up on the human body if I needed to. And see, once you start doing this, gang, any, like R, if that's the second letter of any word, I'll always use rail. Or river, or a railroad track on a river that's on buoys that keep it floating. Yeah.
I do realize there's no R there. I just kind of created that in my mind.
So it's not like, there's an exponential growth to this.
You see that word Alzheimer's? Okay, I lock that in with Zombie Hour, Ellis Island, schizophrenia, Switzerland Church, International Zone. When I was younger, I'd get in a lot of trouble because I would do so well on my tests, but sometimes my spelling was bad and it would really pull down my grade. So, that's the reason I'm so good at this. I mean, you don't have to be as thorough as I am, but it's good to have a few alphabet lists. Or you could say a Richfield hand if you don't like to switch them around. But certain ones draw their own conclusion. You could say Patricia Smith, or you could say Patricia's Sailing Yacht, or you could say Patricia's Southern Yankee. You could say I'm a Southern Yankee because I go to Florida. Diesel ignition, exhaust. Diesel exhaust fuel. I never had a problem with that. The only problem with this word is the two I's, and I would just lock that in with Indiana.
Much like New York. You see that? See how sharp that was? New York's not the only people that can be the city that never sleeps. And I have a character that I lock in with Indiana, which I don't want to get into. I have, a lot of times I'll have, I mostly use female characters, but I have an alphabet list of male characters. Sometimes they're a better fit for, maybe a word or something, this one I intentionally changed this one.
Let's use a male figure. With Frank's Asperger syndrome and Columbus Island. Again,
and incidentally, a lot of times when a CI is together, I will take that I and set it inside that C. And we'll just use this word as an example. The fascination was that how could that I stay inside that C when there's an opening? And it's because that little dot is, let's say, magnetically connected to that I stroke that it's too big. So it would confuse you. You think, boy, that I could slide out. No, it couldn't, because it's, let's say, magnetically connected or through strings or somehow, or I can't think of propulsion, where it keeps it in there. So you could say I really had a fascination with that CI. How does that I stay in that C? Or, let me see, I'm afraid I might say something wrong or offensive, or God, this world, you can't say anything or somebody will get offensive.
I would actually use Columbus Igloo there, Narcotics Anonymous, Texas Igloo on, and on is just a person whose head is always, let's say, bright, metaphorically, let's say, or literally, that word, but if you do, you use Narcotics Anonymous, Texas on. All right, you get the point, gang. Here I would use, Internet Explorer, Vibrating Eye.
I would use London's Internet Explorer Vibrating Eye, or Linda's Internet Explorer Vibrating Eye. And that word, Internet Explorer, is not that. That's not my Internet Explorer. I can't tell you what my Internet Explorer is, but I will tell you this. It's related to the sternum.
Don't read into that. There's nothing inappropriate there. The sternum, and then I have the I, the EYE by the I. It's just an extra human I. So don't think I'm trying to say stuff that I'm not.
You see, the Italians have a beautiful saying that I like. Everything has double meaning.
Now, I don't know why I was so worried about using the word assault rifle, but, I would just use Diane's assault rifle for calendar.
All right, John, we get it. We get it. For God's
I changed it
sakes.
to anti-reflective coating because I was, I don't know, worried that I'd say something wrong. You got to be so careful nowadays. Arrive in the mail so she doesn't have problems with her reflective glasses when she talks on the nightly news. Can you tell that I like Diane Sawyer? Is it that obvious? I'm just being silly there. Again, Ellis Island, and that would be a good, again, Columbus, Ellis Island League, and you could say, particularly, or let's say the Irish American came over.
See, back to what I was saying before. Anytime I have an L hanging, I automatically change it into a league or let's say, before I was saying a rail or an association or an operation, when the two letters become three after you work with this for, a number of years. And then you become a master of your own destiny.
Through Ellis Island, okay, and they couldn't reach the ceiling because they're a little shorter than the average person. Here I would just use Eleanor Roosevelt's E&E Tavern. You get the idea, gang. Here, this is a little bit next level. That's my symbol for B. Whisper words of wisdom, let it be. That's my symbol for on. And I'll do that. I'll shorthand a lot of things, like Mid-Atlantic Leather, as opposed to saying Mary's Athletic League. The other thing...
Why did my stick figure for the letter B have nothing going on? Because it was just being peaceful, that's why. And I do a lot of stuff with, I do a lot of stuff. Any word I can also... I'm not sharing all my secrets, folks. Any word I can also use Greg shorthand, okay? Or American Sign Language. Incorporate into the body. You could even switch every other letter. You could also work right to left as opposed to left to right. In other words, intentionally reverse them to give you more information. Everything gets locked into the word. Much like a dancer, when you get off beat, when you lose your footing, you get back on the beat. Same thing with a student in college. When you lose your footing, you get back on the beat. And the beat in this case is what? The spelling of the word.
And this is bonus footage as well. When I was young and a rookie, what I used to do, before I knew this, I would just use a symbol. And I'm not saying you have to learn Greg shorthand. Just learn the alphabet. And you could say any word, like Greg, for example. The shorthand for Greg is like this, a little bit longer than the C. The voice and on-voice syllables, K and G. And I would just use, I forgot my American Sign Language for G, and I don't want to embarrass myself. I'm going to take a shot. I think it's like this, and I think H is like that. If I'm wrong, forgive me. I did not look that up, folks. I just had to keep my focus when I was making this video, so I was a little slippery.
See, I don't do that anymore, but I used to. You got to start somewhere. You got to start somewhere, man. You got to start somewhere. And like I said, even if all you have is a first name and a car, Diane's Isuzu, John's Opel.
See, I meant to say O. I'm sorry. I meant to say J. That's the power of the mind. The spelling, that guy's name overtook my system, which is okay. Sometimes I will switch and say,
Linda's
like that. J. O'Reilly's holy name.
Opel. Chris's Honda. Zambo's Opel.
I think I know it. I don't use it anymore.
That is not my last name, by the way. I think I said that before. I use O'Reilly's Auto Parts a lot.
But that's all I used to do. I moved that to the end of the word. But notice what I just said. When I was young, all I used to do, I had a first name and Greg shorthand. And it increased my grade point average by, let's say, 10% easily.
And I also used to use American Sign Language for the last letter. Of course, you could pick the first or the third. Come up with any system you want. It's your brain. Nobody's here to criticize you.
When I started using two-letter combinations like Irish American, like church, like Ohio University, like, let's say, holy name, let's say, an Irish last name, let's say Garfield River, let's say Dayton Intensive Care, let's say Shoehouse Horror, like the Yin and the Yang. There's a painting company I know that's RT. That alone will help you. I remember one test I took. I had a Nike symbol, which is an R. God, it was enough to get a B in that class without it.
referring to Great Shorthand, obviously.
The F or a little F.
Incidentally, I did not study for that test. I had to write a 14-page paper, and I still passed it, sort of. I mean, it was nothing to write home about, but the point is, how could a person be good enough to get a passing grade on a test without even studying? Because I had some tricks, that's why.
So I was taking more than one class at a time. But maybe I'll cover that in another video. But that sounds out of the scope for today. Let me just run through my notes and make sure I got everything. And incidentally, you can follow your own system, even in our class. I had this book on my bookshelf, but we were talking about dogs, right? Okay? I'm more of a lab guy. I've never been a big fan of small dogs. But the point is, you could have an alphabet list of dogs. I couldn't, because I don't know dogs. But I'll tell you what I do have an alphabet list of. Right there. There's your bicycles, right? Bianchi, Cannondale, Diamondback, blah, 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 specialized trick. Some of them I had to get creative, like unicycle or workman cycle or velodrome cycle. All right, let's see. I think we got everything. I'm just going to run through my notes here without you seeing them.
Now, you might be thinking, this is ridiculous. It's too much work. I agree with you. I never use 90% of what I'm saying. I just use the same 3 series or 4 or 5 series of alphabet list. I'm just throwing out ideas. Rarely do I use bicycles. But twice a month, I will rummage through, some of my list. I will rummage through some of my lists there. There's an alphabet list of animals. I usually don't keep that there. I just brought it out for the video. Some of those I've changed over my life. So if you get in a jam, like I was talking about with fair innings, and I wanted to change that R to an RV for Allen Iverson's RV because I didn't like the fit, and I could do it without too much work because I review this stuff twice a month. That's why.
Might be a little bit of pause. Oh, I just wanted to say the reason the English language is so difficult is because we have 44 sounds made up by 26 letters. So if you're not a good speller, don't feel guilty, particularly men, because essentially they're asking you to lie. And it's hard for some people to lie to themselves. They're telling you to pronounce the doggone word one way, and the spelling's different. People say, oh, sound it out, Johnny or Sarah. No, 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 and 1,000 times no. You can say sound out about 60, 70% of the words, but the rest of them, God, some people might even argue 40% if you count Latin derivatives and all that. It's not even close to be sounded out. You want to tell the children the story out. I like that.
Some linguistics believe that we should have 44 symbols in our language because we have 44 sounds. My personal opinion, it is a joke. We are so behind in this country as opposed to a language where where the alphabets, other countries where alphabets are logical. Only about 35% of the men in this country have writing skills to survive in a white-collar job.
Do one more thing. I'm looking for this card. This will be my part 2 video. Okay? This video. And this is going to be the part 2 video. I strongly suggest you watch this, gang. This will be a little bit more creative. I didn't want to get too creative. I wanted to focus on word mapping. So this is my part 2. The major system, and if you're not, you could just look that up on YouTube. The major system for memory follows the same system as Greek shorthand. It's the exact same, 100% carbon copy. I'm not telling you to learn Greek shorthand. I'm just suggesting you learn the alphabet. I'm not. See, when I put that in there, when I make this video, I'm going to put just like it is. It's not made yet, because I'll say ABC 1 2 3. That'll be my video. There's a lot of videos on the major system or the mnemonic major system. I might touch on Greek shorthand, but it'll mostly be on the major. Well, that's not true. I'll touch on Greek shorthand. I'm going to start it back up. I'm telling you to learn American Sign Language. I'm just suggesting you use the alphabet. Even we have a woman named Catherine, right? This is stupid.
Let me try to bring that first one back. I was shaking my camera a little bit.
Only about 35% of the men in this country have writing skills to survive in a white-collar job.
Do one more thing. And I'm looking for this card. This will be my part 2 video. Okay? This video. And this is going to be the part 2 video. I strongly suggest you watch this, gang.
I just wanted you to see the title of that first video.
It was on the major system, or the mnemonic major system. I might touch on Greg Shorthand, but it'll mostly be on the major. Well, that's not true. I'll touch on Greg Shorthand. I'm going to start it back up. I'm telling you to learn American Sign Language. I'm just suggesting you use the alphabet. Even we have a woman named Catherine, right? This is stupid. I got dorky here. It was cool, but it just didn't come out good. Basically, I'm showing you how I use each finger to rep. One was the daughter, and one was the wife, and one was the psychiatrist, and one was blah blah blah. It's just too silly. Same thing with here. Basically, I'm just
and you put those families where it would make sense. Where would the wife make sense? On the ring finger. Where would I'm not even gonna I'm not gonna talk about where I would put the other people, but the point is like I think one of the case studies, the daughter's name began with an L. That's why I put her on I think that's called the index finger, and then I use the thumb for the patient himself.
It's good, but it was a little sloppy, and I didn't like it. There's not, like I said, use your hands. Or you can say that's Charlie, Charlie's wife, Charlie's daughter, Charlie's nurse, Charlie's psychiatrist. Hey, that wasn't stage folk. I swear to God it wasn't. Watch this video. That one's part 2, and this is part 1. Goes to this video if you would ever wanted to. Okay,
That word up top was YouTube.
Part 2. Although I'm not going to call it part 2. I'm going to end with this, folks. We are at 27 minutes. I just paused. Let me show you something, okay? When I got this book before I went to class, and this has nothing to do with creativity. As far as I'm concerned, this class was taken at a college called Case. Thank God I didn't say this woman's last name. I almost did, and I don't have the ability to delete stuff. Beth and Eleanor Roosevelt, and they fight each other. So when the teacher says, I'm trying to think of what I locked in. Oh, the medical field, they overemphasize what they can do. I will place that on, let's say, Beth's body, overemphasize, or Eleanor Roosevelt. Let's put this down for a second. See, like right there, Beth and Eleanor Roosevelt are competing, okay? And Beth is saying she can overemphasize her cheekbones, which Beth does have nice cheekbones. But Eleanor, because her name begins with an E, around her, let's say, eyebrow. So they're like fighting, that they overemphasize the good they can do, In other words, just because someone's good looking doesn't automatically make them, let's say, good.
See, Eleanor Roosevelt's best symbol, which is her eye, let's say, her eyelid, let's say eyelashes up around her eyebrow, down to her eye bag. That's my symbol for the letter E, or Eleanor Roosevelt. And she competes with Beth, who I use the cheekbone along the nasolacrimal duct because it's shaped like a B. And then I got the book right by my book bag, let's say hidden inside my book bag so there's no cheating going on.
So you get the point. And then if you're, let's say, next level, and you understand how you could put, let's say, 8, because this book is thick, and this was taught to me actually by that guy I mentioned earlier. Station 1, Station 2, Station 3, Station 4, Station 5, Station 6, Station 7.
I meant to put the first 8 stations on the front page, and then the let's say 7 through 16 on the back. You could also open up the book and add 16 more stations, okay? And you might say that's confusing. No, it's not. If you know that Odessa is number 15, it's not confusing at all.
And 8, and 9, and 10, all the way up to 16. And if you know the alphabet switcheroo, Ann, Beth, Chris, Diane, Eleanor Roosevelt, and Frank, and then you can lock it in, particularly if you know the major system, because you got 2 things already tied in. The major system goes from 00 to 99. And then if you know a few athletes like John Elway, like Ray Guy, like...
Obviously, I would put John Elway at the 7th station, connected with the 7th letter of the alphabet. Ray Guy, I would put at the 8th station, which I believe is Heather. And I'll marry these people up. Ray Guy'd be married to Heather. John Elway would be married to Gail, because Gail's the 7th letter. Or let's say, then I got, there's a lot going on there, man. There's a lot going on at that station.
friend Joe, who used to wear number 3, and this other guy, I don't feel comfortable saying his name, this guy Tony, that was a soccer player, that's 5. He's married to Eleanor Roosevelt, metaphorically speaking, because he's number 5, and Eleanor Roosevelt is the...
Not metaphorically speaking when you're taking the test. When you're taking the test, that is, let's say, grounded in common law.
Let's say the 5th letter of the alphabet is E. I hope I'm saying that right.
You are saying that right, because another one of Eleanor's symbols is her full face to the jaw of the chin.
A little bonus footage for you, by the way. They say when you read, you should never look down. You should always have when I'm standing, I put it up there, okay? We won't get into that. There's a lot of neuroscience behind that it's best to read up and not look down when you're reading. You see, when I'm sitting down, I'm looking up. Okay.
Basically, there, I was just saying you can use your textbook as a memory palace. And because the title is bioethics, I just use Beth and Eleanor Roosevelt. And when I'm listening to the professor, any professor, I just lock in what he or she says every day in class, because I want the professor to think I'm the best listener in the world. And I don't want, sometimes I will write down what they say, because I'm always preparing for the essay, because I have no problem with the other parts. The essays, particularly in 300 level classes, they'll rip you apart if you don't give good essays. But imagine if you can say 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 things that the professor said in class. Professors have egos, okay? Every professor thinks they're amazing. The history professor thinks that if people would just understand history. The gym teacher thinks if people would just stay in shape, everything would be fine. The chemistry teacher thinks if you get my point.
There was another thing the teacher said too. This is all from memory. That's not stage folk. The teacher talked about Jehovah Witness and the blood. They don't like giving blood. Right there's my Jehovah Jehovah's in the back along the jackal of the Achilles heel. Football's up here. See that? I mean, that's good. And imagine if you put that on the test. Something that the professor said from the first day of class. You're almost guaranteed an A if you can do that. Start this guy's. It might have my screen name, and I don't want it. 36. Okay, this is the 4,000 most commonly used words in the English language.
This is just more of the same. You can shut this off. Unless you want to get some good ideas from me. You got to come up with your own acronyms, but I think I have some good ones. Before I do that, let me just look over my notes. I just feel for anybody that wants to be an educated person, I would recommend that they do not watch television programs that constantly have blinking screens and have writing going on simultaneously at the bottom of the screen when people are talking. I was so delighted to see that more and more people are getting away from their televisions. Believe me when I tell you this. When you have 2 people talking on the news about real important current events and the screen's blinking and it's moving and the bottom's going like this and they're jumping so quick from person A and that so-called expert and they're switching 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 and it's blinking and it's moving. Gang, educated people don't do that. Do not keep your TV in the main office, in your main room. Keep it in your basement if you're going to watch TV. We got to get away from that as a culture. I mean, we're in a lot of trouble. The other thing, that we're in a lot of trouble is, is people eating too much. We got to get a handle on that. A lot of times what I'll do, after I'll have a meal, I'll write down N/F, no food until like 2 hours later. And of course you don't want to eat late at night. It's going to mess with your sleep. Easier said than done, I know. All right, I'm going to play this out.
This sometimes. Now, some of this I could easily map that out.
Again, keep in mind, this is at 150 speed. I do not talk like this normally. And I just, it was just a little, so whatever that's worth.
You want to watch TED Talks. You want to read books. You don't want to watch news programs that has writing going on across the screen while the people are talking. That's a fact.
I guess you could slow it back down if it's too quick for you. But it probably makes more sense to watch it at this speed because I'm not seeing any pearls of, let's say, neuroscience here.
Like, right, diesel, ignition fuel, Franklin, emergency room, ant. Ant is similar to an ant, but it's an ant. Dayton International Grocery, right? Dayton International Grocery, information technology. I would split that syllable-wise, but anyway, you could say Texas Athletic League, Dignity, Nashville Island, Nashville Iguana, Nashville Igloo, Coyote Ear. There's a whole big story around that I'm not getting into. Sometimes I'll use M&M candy here. A lot of times I'll use Greg Shorthand at the end of the word, Shoe House. Let's say Dayton's Dim, Dayton's Instant Message, Dayton's Inn. I'll use a person with,
Or Diane's Instant Message, Diane Sawyer's Instant Message. It diminishes me so bad. I don't get instant messages from her. I wish I did.
But I just call in a woman named Nancy who's Navajo. So Dayton Igloo and Navajo Nancy emergency room. That's basically it. I might let that play out. You can feel free to shut that off. But before you do that, I just want to show you some alphabet lists that I think I might have talked about this. This is an alphabet list I use at the end of words a lot, that are good, graveyard.
I did talk about that. But it's bears repeating because, over the years, I used to just use animals, and I'm getting away from animals, sort of, because this makes more sense because it's more of a picture.
That's excellent, because it's nightclub, zoo, Quicken Loans Arena. I talked about that already. Here's an alphabet list of...
And incidentally, let's talk about Eleanor Roosevelt's electron cloud. I talked about that, how the eye goes around the eyebrow through the, let's say, bags. I mean, it's mean to say, but everybody has bags under their eyes when they're over 50, so I'm not cutting down Eleanor Roosevelt. She was a very sharp woman. But her electron cloud, that's just, let's say, her goodness emanating from her eye. So, some of these, back to Nancy, it's more than just a knee, It's more than just a knee and a Nissan and a pack of Newport cigarettes. You start working with these things, gang, and they, you start coming up with things you couldn't even believe.
Park rides. My sister actually worked at an amusement park, and I got roped into working there.
This is an alphabet list of amusement park rides. I never use this, but it's good to have in my book. Maybe twice a month I'll go through some of these. Because sometimes you'll get asked a specific question. I can't think of any word that we have that starts with... I'm trying to think of something in this class, and I my book's over there, and I don't want to get up. Let's just use the word. I think my camera's or my light's flashing in the background. I'm going to ignore it. Death. I think we're coming up on studying end of life. But double loop. You could say, should we let the person live or should we not? It's a double loop decision. In other words, 6 and 1.5 dozen in the other. And a lot of these case studies are very hard like that, where you're scared to answer because, either answer could be right.
At actually Kittyland. And I was always happy when someone called off because they would take me out of Kittyland, and I got to work the older adult rides, which was kind of fun.
My sister was the director of Kittyland, so I had to work there for a year. She recruited me. And all I was saying is, when people called off, I got to leave Kittyland, which I was so happy.
But you see there, the slide, tilt-a-wheel.
See, and that's where the benefit of pre-knowledge comes in. Let's say you're using that Hurricane amusement park ride. Hank Williams Jr. is there. Huffington Post Cigarettes is there. Honda's there. Heather's there. You know, you talk about that that weaving. Oh, Heather's smoking her Huffington Post cigarettes. I was going to say G is government issued cigarettes. You know, and she's, let's say, waiting for her kids to get off of the hurricane.
At the 8th station of the Memory Palace, whichever one you happen to pick for whatever test you're studying on. And you can keep using them over and over and over and over again. Gang, this is back to Plato and Aristotle. This stuff's 3,000 years old, man. I'm not reinventing the wheel here. I'm reinventing it in far as my mind and my own personal experience.
You know what I mean? You could, easily lock that stuff in when you got a few extra little helpers along the way. That's a DeWalt flashlight, and it blinks when the battery's running low. And I'm not going to move, so we're just going to have to deal with it.
NASCAR, bumper rides, all aboard. The monorail, I just call it the line. Alphabet list of restaurants, So again, you can double it up, and
I just call it if that was L, I call it the long line, because anytime, I know I said this, but that's the symbol for Linda. Everything is long. The ladder is long for her tool. Whereas Ann would use an air gun, and Beth would use a bandsaw, and Chris would use a circular saw, and Diane Sawyer would use a drill, and Eleanor Roosevelt would use an edger, and Frank would use a file.
Works at, let's say, Arby's or Landen's. Beth works at Burger King. It's so hard for me. No, I can't let Beth work at Burger King. No, I'm just being silly. No, actually, there's a lot of people that clean house working at Burger King, especially managers. I know Burger King managers that make more than people with master's degrees, so let's not make fun of people that work at fast food restaurants. Coffee cup, Diane eats at Denny's. The Big Egg, I actually used that with Eleanor Roosevelt. I won't get into why I use that. Gail.
Why do I have Five Guys restaurant? 5 guys and a father. Why? Because I needed a number 6 because it's the 6th letter of the alphabet.
Gail eats at Gyro George. Heather eats at Harry's Steakhouse. You get the idea. IHOP, Jack in the Box, blah, 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 blah.
Again, notice Long John Silver, related to Linda. See how easy this is once you start to work with it.
That's a popular restaurant here.
I'm going to shut this flashlight off because it's bugging me a little bit. I can't find the shutter off thing. There it goes. All right.
Trisha, Pizza Hut, and also served on Panera Bread. And Willow works at the Waffle House. This is now.
What is Patricia driving when she's serving that Panera Bread? A Pinto. What is Patricia smoking? Pall Mall cigarettes. What is Patricia listening to? Pancho and Lefty. Or, you could use a musician that begins with the letter P.
Alphabet list of occupation.
Like Paul Simon?
Blah, 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 jeweler.
I'm just giving you ideas here, folks. I think I have an alphabet list of movies. I never use this stuff, folks. I just stick with my 5 or, 5 that I always use. I'm not trying to move mountains, man. I'm just trying to get A's in school. Or maybe I am trying to move mountains.
This is an alphabet list of paints, which I never use, but hey, it's good to have it anyhow. I often have a lot of good memories with that word Pratt and Lambert. It's a lot of good story. That one guy and I really bonded. We worked 4 years together. We really knew our paints, or we thought we did. At 20 years old, we thought we were the next, going to open up our own Glidden and our own Sherwin-Williams. Sometimes you got to get creative with I-beam paint.
Let me stop there. You notice what I just said? Sometimes you have to get creative with I-beam paint. I was a welder. It was the first job I had that I made over $18 an hour. There was a guy, all he did was paint I-beams, okay? And it was like a separate shop, but they were connected. And I got to know these guys a little bit. Let me tell you, there were some people making some good money. I mean, I know people with high school diplomas that make over $30 an hour. So, there's all kinds of ways to make it. But my point is, you could say, I can't come up with a list of paint because there's no paint that begins with an I. Yeah, there is. I-beam paint. Even Diane, I believe I used decorative.
There's an alphabet list of lead singers. I might have talked about that already. I'm pretty sure I did. Okay. There's an alphabet list of religions. Again, Anne's an atheist. Beth is Buddhism. Chris is Christian. Diane's Druid. I didn't know Diane Sawyer was a Druid. She is now. Eleanor Roosevelt is Episcopalian. Frank is a free thinker. I should cross that out. I never use Greek gods. I'm not looking. What do I use? Is it General Assembly? Hey, I got it right. Heather's Hindus. Jay is Jesuit. Linda's Lutheran. I don't use monk. I want to start using Mennonite. I should write that stuff out. All right, you get the idea there.
Incidentally, folks, I never use that. So you might be thinking to yourself, where's this guy going with all these alphabet lists? I just have them. I really don't need. I got plenty of power to get good grades, but
Okay. All right. Feel free to shut it off. I'm just going to play these out. Make sure this is just me freelance. And this is how I practiced when I was younger. I would just look at the 2,000 most commonly used words, and I would just start busting them up and keeping a little thing like this and using acronyms, which I can't open this up because I'm too frightened what might be in there. But I can tell you some off board. Ashland University, Ohio University, General Hospital, Texas Energy, Traffic Controller, Upper I or Urban I, AD, Athletic Director, NS, Nancy, I don't want to say her last name, United Football.
I have no idea where my screen went. I hope it comes back. It's okay if it doesn't. I'm happy enough with this video. I'm shocked I did that.
WF, Optical Center for OC, EG, Engine Gas, Roadman for RM.
Incidentally, Roadman works at ESPN 850, or he used to back in back in the late 90s. So these things have to have meaning for you. And you might say, well, it's confusing. But keep in mind, there's I think they're called collocations or alliterations. In other words, there's certain patterns to our language. Certain letters go together. Let's say if you see a word that's reversed, it's wrong unless you intentionally reverse it. So it's not as hard as you think. Like I said before, anytime there's an R for the second letter, it's always a rail. Anytime a letter ends with an N, it's always nation, like Irish American nation, or let's say Allen Iverson's nation.
AH, amp hour, JE, journal entry, RF, front radiator, OY, opium yacht. And you just keep that. There's only so many words. There can only be so many combinations. You got to make it personalized to yourself. I'm going to start this back up. Here. And I might be flipping some of these letters, gang, because I'm looking through this phone. You could use M&M Candy there, or Mary McDonald. Here you could say Indiana Shoe House. And it's not abstract, gang. It's not like, I'm going to use Indiana here. It's like, I said, it can only be Indiana or Ida. It can only be Diane Sawyer or Dayton. That's why I don't get confused. I have a system. Where the syllable breaks, I only use people or places. Then I'll use an action verb. Then I'll use automobiles. I'll use an animal. I'll use something that I do not use at the first letter. That's why I don't get confused.
I know I keep saying that, but it bears repeating. You have no idea how powerful this system is once you get to it. You have no idea. Sometimes I take a class and literally there's been teachers that have thought that the dean has sent me into their class because I was able to give almost verbatim the PowerPoint information. I mean, when I was younger, I used to really, let's say, muscle up on my in-class participation to compensate for my poor writing skills. I don't have to do that anymore because I, relatively speaking, do not have poor writing skills. And sometimes like here, plain dealer. I would use plain dealer football, but you could use plain dealer Ferris wheel. And sometimes I'll intentionally flip them. You'll see it coming up like fire department, or Planet Fitness. Like I might put, like, let's say I was studying for a test and the teacher said, what is PDF? I would say plain dealer football is probably how I would do that, or a Ferris wheel, or I would use an animal, falcon with frog characteristics. That's, in other words, a falcon that could turn into a frog, but also a frog that could turn back into a falcon. I'll put a little line here, and then I might say FD for fire department, and this way, if there's not enough for the word to give me the answer, I'll make it so it's enough. Or I have a system too. Sometimes, if for whatever reason, I'm not getting what I need, I'll sometimes just go all colors: purple, dark Daffy Darwin, Ford F-150. Or sometimes I'll just go all animals: puppy, dog, falcon. Or sometimes, let's say, singers. I'll admit it, I can't think of it. I can't say I don't use singers that often. I think I used David Allan Coe there. I can't. I'll humble myself, okay? I can't. I think I used Paul Simon for P. What do I see if I can get it for fun? What do I use for F? Fleetwood Mac. See? So let's say print the PDF. PDFs are important. Well, Paul Simon's important. Fleetwood Mac's important. David Allan Coe's important. Or the Doors you could use. Incidentally, that's a good lock-in. Nanotechnology, I use that a lot. Here's a good example of what I was just talking about. Pennsylvania Rail. I would probably go. Usually I don't double up 2 states in a row, but in this case I would. Pennsylvania, Rhode Island's neurotechnology. Well, you could say, what is printing? It is a form of nanotechnology. With the Gutenberg press. When I was your age, I had to walk 7 miles to school. And really, and I'm not trying to be funny, but these kids don't know how easy they got it. My biggest problem was that when I was in school, when I was younger, was keeping my darn printer running, not the class. That was a nightmare before, let's say, apps and stuff like that and dot matrix printers. I don't know how I got off talking about all that, but
right there, fire department, Pennsylvania fire.
You see how, I switched those, fire department. Intentionally.
Fire department, non-compliant Tom, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island. It can only be Linda or London. Linda's after work, Switzerland. Switzerland University Information Technology, leaving Neanderthal. A lot of times I'll use LA Airport or Linda Anderson. I probably should be talking louder. And some of these I wish I could tell you, but I'm too afraid. I might say something that's... I swear. I don't know why. See, I'm not afraid now because I just had too much going on in my mind. Linda's Emotion Anonymous, Dayton's Emergency Room. Sometimes I won't even worry about this.
I'm not a member of that fellowship, incidentally. Nor am I a member of any drug-related groups. But a lot of times I'll do that. I'll use... Emotional Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous. Sometimes I'll even create my own, so this way, it's, you shorten them up, So, even as opposed to Linda's After Work or A&W's Root Beer, you just use law, depends. Sometimes you can use all 3 at once.
Syllable. I'll just break them where it makes sense. I'm not a member of that fellowship, nor have I ever had a drug problem, but, Angus Young.
Sorry about all this repeating, gang. I honestly, it's, there's a saying, man, like, someone's personality is their personality. I didn't think I said that twice, and a lot of times anyway, sorry about all this triple double. This is the third video of the overlay on this video. So, I keep interjecting and all that because it's the third overlay. Anyway.
London's English now. Youngstown Emergency Room. Willows After Work. Shoe House IP address. Bump this up here.
It's important to know, too, I wasn't this good when I first started, okay? So it wasn't like I could just rattle this stuff off like, Superman, it took me, I'll be honest, till I got at this level, it took me well over a year, maybe even longer. But the results didn't take longer. Those happened almost immediately. Those happened as soon as I had one alphabet list. See, a lot of times in class or wherever on a job, people are too scared to answer in case they're wrong. Could you imagine sitting at a corporate office where you're, around high-powered people and they flash a word like this and your mind goes blank because you only slept 4 hours, or you're worried about your kids, or you're worried about your car not running right? Even if you're tired, all you got to do is look at the word. Enough will come back so you can keep your job, I'll tell you that much.
Stop Diversity and Information Technology. Right there, MA. Excuse me, MA. State that's abbreviated MA. I'm tired. I don't even know that. I should know that. But I'm scared I'm going to say it wrong. Is it Massachusetts? Hope I don't sound dumb. 8. Bump this up a little bit. Right there, left foot. No, I'm sorry. That's I can't say what that is. If that was
Yeah, when I made this, folks, I'm looking through a small iPhone, so that's why I'm butchering some of these letters. When I actually can't say that one, but what I can say, I'll use a first last name. Let's just say Frank Thomas or Felicia Thomas.
LF, I would use left foot. It's FT. No, I can't say that one. But I would use Loseretti there, Rita Elizabeth, Texas University, Rita Elizabeth, Vibrating Eye. I use a different high school, but let's just say Texas Emergency Room. Linda's Emotional Anonymous. Service Tech there, which is a company. Linda's Emotional Anonymous, Service Tech Legal. I would just use LEG, Athletic League, or Linda's Engine Gas. PP, let's just say related to Patricia. Patricia's puppy, Patricia's dog. Sometimes TT, I'll use Tina, with a last name that begins with T. And it jumps around. Let's say there was a Tina with a last name that began with B. I would just use Tina Bell, or TB, which is a disease, right? TB, you have TB. Fire extinguisher. IE, Internet Explorer. ID, your license, your ID, Linda's ID. You put a lid on it so it wouldn't get damaged. Or you could say wrap it in whatever they call that when you put a laminate over something. Real Yummy, that's a Real Yummy is an imaginary concrete metal bracket that I actually created.
That's very important what I just said. A Real Yummy. A lot of times when they're pouring concrete, they'll put rebar in there, and the folks will tie it together with wire, and sometimes they spray paint it with a green paint so it doesn't rust. Okay, it's a Real Yummy. It's called a Real Yummy piece of metal. If it was DY, they have what they call a double yummy. Now, I said that as a matter of fact, as if that was a true statement. That's a total fabricated story. There is no such thing as rebar called Real Yummy or rebar called double yummy that helps concrete stick together. But as far as I'm concerned, there is, and it's very real. And it does a darn good job at least helping me to accomplish what I need to accomplish.
I would just use Service Tech Yacht, Loseretti. And then let's say Linda's Igloo fire extinguisher, which would be good. Lifestyle, you'd want to have a fire extinguisher in an igloo. That's what makes it funny. It's like, no, you won't, because it's ice. Oh, that's what makes it memorable. I might be talking a little low, So sorry about that. But Emerald Island. Here I would say, bump this up. Ohio Gulf.
See, and a lot of times, like Emerald Island, in a word with the EI, I will kick in a Mary Black song. This is the last call for Ellis Island. This is the last time, blah, 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 you know. I can do that. You can do that if you have a musician, you know. Even like Cyndi Lauper, you know, with Captain Lou Albano. If, man, you get that, you start locking that in with information, look out, man. You will breeze through whatever you want to breeze through.
Calvin Klein's.
I wish the screen was clearer. There's nothing I can do about that. And I'm not remaking this video. I'm just going to go with it. It's a shame. It just won't come through super clear, but hopefully it'll be clear enough if you watch it on a laptop.
You could use a last name there, Linda, and pick your last name. You could use an Irish last name, Calvin Klein's. Again,
A lot of times for I'll just use O'Reilly's Auto Parts. You know, so a woman named Linda that got a job at O'Reilly's Auto Parts.
Linda with an Irish last name, Cocaine Anonymous, Texas. Let's just say Island or Igloo with a person named On, whose face is always on, non-compliant Gale, Lower Youngstown, say Northeast Lower Youngstown. Let's say Linda with an Irish last name, Northeast section, Lower Youngstown. Bump that up a little bit. The state abbreviated MA, and I would just use J or, which is a yin and yang symbol. This is a little tricky word to spell. Maintenance. I did maintenance on Texas.
That can be body mapped very easily. Jay's or Jacqueline's or is, you know, let's say her belly button. You see how I double those up? So I got the location and I got the human body. You know, that's why I use people or places. Again, the Jacksonville, you know, Jacksonville, Ohio. I would keep that as one word with brackets, and then I would just say or, you know, and I would be able to, you know, put that on the earth, you know, wherever I would place that. And I would, let's say this, so right now I would not be thinking about, let's say, I forgot the name I used. Jacksonville. I would not be thinking about Jay or Jane. I would be thinking about Jacksonville. So let's just pretend this isn't a person, but is the outline of the earth of Jacksonville. Of course, it would be shaped like a J. So where would the belly button of Jacksonville be? You know, pretend it's a person somewhere in the middle, let's say. That's great. When you get that good, then you can anthropomorphize anything. You know, again, if this was a human, well, we got a human's face, but let's say we didn't. You know, where would the eyes be? Roughly speaking, the nose, the ears, and so on. You know, so okay.
It's energy, and then I also did maintenance on National Automotive Nerve Center Equator. Let me show you where the center equator is, by the way. Center equator is right there, the pinna of the ear. And then I forget about everything else. And I only focusing on the ear now. And the ear, because it becomes its own human. The ear has its own eyes and nose and mouth and ears and sternum and blah, blah, blah. So, and I do a little whole big thing about the center equator and the ear. And, you know, the ear is actually, the eye is actually in the, the ear is the C, okay? Even though it starts with a E. But the eye is the E. And I do a whole thing where the eye wraps around the brain and keeps you warm in the wintertime.
Where the eye of the pinna, where the eye of the C, where the eye of the ear wraps around the brain. I just said to help keep you warm in the wintertime.
That's a little next level stuff. And a little out there, admittedly so. Okay, Carrie Edwards campaign, okay? Lower Youngstown. Say, you could say Michigan or Marysville, Allen Iverson's Nation, Lower Youngstown. Here I would use state abbreviation for MA. Here I would use Carrie Edwards. I would use state abbreviation for MA, emergency room, Upper Peninsula, or you could say Euroblaze Peninsula. Here I would use Long Linda. All right, you get the idea, gang. Any word I can look at, and I can't show you this book. I wish I could, because I'm afraid that there might be something in it that, I'm just too frightened. But it's a list of acronyms that I have put down and a few more alphabet. You see that? That was PDF at the bottom.
I'm going to shut it off, folks. I'm going to shut it off. The only thing I'm not happy about is the blurriness at the end. Other than that, I think it's a decent it's a decent video. It's important you come up with your own acronyms, and the cool thing is you can use it class after class. Like when you take a college class, it's like you take a new class. When you do this for yourself, it stays with you for the rest of your life. Ann will always be Ann. Beth will always be Beth. For this class, for medical terminology, for endocrinology, for whatever, for welding, for machining, Ann is always Ann. Beth is always Beth. Chris is always Chris. Acura is always an Acura. Buick Boxer, even though it's a Porsche Boxer, I call it a Buick Boxer. A Camaro, a Datsun, a Ford F-150. See, it doesn't change. You keep using it over and over and over again. It stays with you and grows. Have a great night.